Thank you very much, Joan. Even though we were not here, as we were driving, we had the opportunity, the benefits of the digital world to listen to all the previous panel. So maybe we'll pick it up from there. Well, we see that Greece has changed page. So as we heard yesterday, a wonderful interview here with the Prime Minister and the Nobelist professor. We are living an era where Greece has changed page, and of course, in order to do that, it has first of all started with very strong reforms. And I think the name of the game is to sustain the power of the reforms and reinvent reforms. So it's a reformist government. We sustain a growth that I would say it's quite stronger than the average growth of the European Union. And in that sense, digitalization has played an important role in this road. So in this growth, actually yesterday, we had the opportunity to have the lowest unemployment rate that we've had the last, even I would say, 20 years, with less than 8%. And the most significant part, Joanne, is that we have a single-digit unemployment for women. Actually, this is quite we covered a lot of space. Just to remind that when we started back in 2019, the unemployment rate for women was up to 25%, and it has gone down to 9.8%. Also, unemployment for youth was approximately 27%, and now it's down to 10.5 to 11%. So the strong issues that we have in Greece is, besides the growth, is that we have the talent, we have STEM graduates, and this is something that many companies turn to us to find STEM graduates, and that's why we see a significant increase in FDIs. Now the gap in investment, of course, it's more than 6 points. We've reached approximately 15% to 16%. The average European Union investment in GDP reaches 21%. So we have a lot of space to cover, but we're working on it. Now, obviously, we have to face bureaucracy, even though with the reforms we have tried to assist in reducing bureaucracy. I think that we still have a long way to go, and I think this is one of the important issues that we have to face in the second term. We're now in the middle of this term. We have 2 years to go, and I think we should work more on reducing bureaucracy and, of course, digitization. And if you blend digitization with artificial intelligence, I think reforms in artificial intelligence will assist in improving the business environment in Greece.
Excellent. Thanks very much indeed. Let me turn now to Professor Jacobides. Great to have you with us. And yeah, I'm very interested to hear your perspective on what you've seen occurring here in Greece recent years and where you think needs to go.
It was interesting to hear Mr. Papathanasis speak about the macro level, but I think that the focus that we should be having, if we are to unpeel what really is going on, is precisely what this panel promises, which is to look at the sectoral level. And I'm a little concerned that at the sectoral level, things start looking a little different. Where has the growth of Greece been driven from? Primarily from the increase in employment, as you rightly say, but this has a dark side. And the dark side is that productivity has become flat or has fallen in Greece. Also, the growth of employment is primarily driven by employment in unproductive sectors in relative terms. So let's now start thinking about sectors. The sector that has driven Greece is tourism primarily, and there's been a bit of construction. And if you look at any of the indicators, and perhaps I might be again a little less optimistic than my friend George Pakoulatos, I don't think the news are all that positive when you look at them in context. The productivity of Greece lags both in each and every sector. You look at productivity per employee in terms of how effective we are in each sector, and then you can think about the value add that each sector has. For better and for worse, unfortunately for worse, tourism is one of the lowest productivity in terms of GDP per amount of work put in. And if you start looking at it a little bit more carefully, you'll see that beneath the rosy picture lies a somewhat more challenging reality. Challenging even for the future of the sector. Why has tourism been able to be so effective? Partly because it is massively subsidized. It is subsidized first because of the licensing, and we are right now using, without thinking about the long-term implications, natural resources. You look at your own experience of everyone in the room. How is it that you see the Greek summer? There is a privatization of public goods like beaches. There is also willy-nilly expansion in planning, and the only force that is pushing back is the Symbolio της Επικρατείας, the Council of State, on the basis of lawsuits. And it is ironic that in a country that is so dependent on the integrity of its natural environment, we are relying on the Council of State to judge the laws anti-constitutional because they are in violation of the basic rights of its citizens, and there is a bit of a cat and mouse game that is being played. There's other ways in which tourism is subsidized, including by the fact that tourism is a seasonal business, which means that part of the time people are paid by their employers, the other part of the time they're paid by the state because they're on unemployment. If you start looking at the mechanics of it and at what has happened in Q3 and Q4, you will also see that there is a push in terms of the public debt. So tourism and building, which again, not only environmentally, but also in terms of their own viability are undermined, are an issue. Let's now go back to what we see at the European level. What did Draghi say in his report? He had 5 things. He said we need to think about the European integration and competitiveness in services, and competitiveness here is a big issue. Then he said strategic sectors. What are we doing in Greece in terms of strategic sectors? Are we really pushing for industrial policy? No. What is it that is called a strategic investment? Touristic investments in Mykonos and Santorini. Forgive me, this is utter folly. We are paying Rybolovlev, the Russian oligarch who got Skorpios, 4 million cash so he can start developing Skorpios. This is an abuse of focus, and I'm afraid that Greece is moving in the wrong direction, unfortunately, for something that is as old as Greek politics. Everyone's very excited about OPEKP and what's going on. That's not the big issue as far as I'm concerned. The big issue in Greece is policy capture. What do I mean policy capture? I mean that vested interests in every sector are ensuring that regulation, and again, the only place where regulation is really very iffy is in terms of building, where there is a support and facilitation of large touristic developments that might undermine their own futures. These are finding themselves in difficulty. And to give you one specific example from that, there's a friend of mine who is now setting up what should be an exemplar of what Greek businesses have. One of the aging sort of centers, bought a nice place in Vouliagmeni after he sold his business in the Middle East, and he's struggling getting the appropriate permits. Why? Because the highly concentrated hospital sector has the ears of the Ministry of Health, and at each and every sector, the limitations of what innovators can do are holding them back. Greece has an excess of available funds and also a shortage of the ability of transforming the economy. So let's stop supporting the sectors that are economically unproductive and potentially environmentally disruptive, and let's start being real about some of these reforms. With all due respect to Minister Silakakis, I'm not going to throw out some of the reforms. I will implement them even if 30 years late, especially when it comes to the ability of being a little bit more competitive. And again, policy capture rather than the traditional problems that everyone looks at in newspapers is one of the key areas I'd consider.
Okay, thank you very much. Laying down the gauntlet there, so I hope that will make for good discussion afterwards, and no doubt the Minister will want to come back. But let me turn to you, Colin, to get your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Joan. It's wonderful to be back here in Lagonisi, and I think I struggled a little bit when I was thinking about this panel, particularly given the content we've already heard throughout this conference. But I do want to echo the fantastic progress that's been made over the last 10 years. You can see that in our ratings and everything that's happened. But the focus today is more about that kind of sectoral opportunities and where do we see things, particularly over the near term, which for us is probably more 12 to 18 months. We have these things at Moody's that we call industry sector outlooks, or ISOs. And most of the time, they're global, because most of the work we do is across global markets. They're globally competitive firms that we assess. And they've actually moved quite a long way since the start of this year. There's 17 of them, and back in January, I think we had about 7 that were positive and only 2 or 3 that were negative. So that's where we're saying these are the sectors that are going to do well, and these are the sectors that are going to find challenges, particularly over the near term. That has moved a very long way. So as of today, we only have 2 sectors that are positive globally. One is diversified information technology, which ties into all of the debate around data centers and AI and everything else we've been talking about. The other is aerospace and defense. Now, of those 2 sectors, I think sometimes we overlook the fact that, particularly in a European context, Greece does have a lot of experience and, frankly, some advantages compared to some other European countries in the defense sector. So that strikes me as one which we maybe skate over a little bit, but it's really, really important. And when you think about the broader global context with geopolitics and Greece's strategic location, that feels like an area of opportunity for me. But I also want to flip it a little bit, because we could talk again about digitalization and green transition and energy, everything else this conference has been doing. But in an effort to try and be slightly original, I was going to pick out 2 other sectors. Firstly, I think the key message that I've heard here and from other events around Europe, there's a lot of thought and concern around AI and the impact on jobs and the impact on people. But I think the key ingredient in terms of preserving and creating jobs is going to be skills. So again, we're talking about the university sector there for me, where I think, again, Greece has a relative comparative advantage. It does not mean that sector does not need to innovate. And we're already seeing that globally, particularly with some of the large US universities. The UK is catching up a bit in terms of the digital offering that you have there. Why can't Greece do that? And that would bring in not just external revenues again, but it would also help address some of the skills gaps and support the population. The second one is a little bit more of a leap, but bear with me. One of the big stories of the last 10 years is, well, really the last 6 or 7 years, is the transformation of the banking sector, and in particular the massive reductions in non-performing loans. You will have views on that, I'm sure. But we need to recognize that's been achieved by a combination of securitization of non-performing assets and asset sales. Why am I going on about those? Well, because the biggest growing sector in terms of financing investment and supporting the economy in the US is this thing called private credit. And that's a way for essentially non-bank lending to grow and thrive, and particularly to support smaller businesses. And a lot of the structures that we see in private credit in the US have echoes of that kind of perspective of asset sales and management and securitization. So in an effort to say something new, I think I would just add skills and maybe private credit as areas that might be worth exploring. But I'll leave it there.
Very good. Thanks very much for that, Colin. Stefanos, coming from the infrastructure, public road transport sector, how important is, what's been happening there? What's the outlook? How important is that for transforming Greek economy?
Joan, thank you for the opportunity, and I would like to thank the economists for having me again for another year here. I'm here to share my experience and the experience of the public transport in Greece, and of course, I'm talking about Athens, but Athens or the greater Athens area is half the population of Greece, and therefore it has a significant impact on investment, on the economy, and contrary to some of the macro things that we've heard, I can give you a micro a micro image of what went on. Now, we are the largest company, the largest public transport company in Greece, and maybe one of the largest in Europe in terms of one company servicing about 4 million people all together with buses. We started 5 years ago with 1,500 buses that were all older buses, about 17 and a half, 19 years fleet. The age, the medium age of our fleet was like that. We had to make a lot of investment thanks to the efforts of this particular minister here, Mr. Papathanasis, from the European funds, the RRF, the ESPA and the other funds, the modernization fund now, and we made a big effort and a huge investment of more than 2 billion euros to change or renew the fleet of buses, 1,500 buses, all green. Now, that's not the whole story. We didn't just change the fleet or are changing the fleet. We created a totally new technological era in public transport in Greece. We went from the older way of operating buses to the electric and hydrogen buses. But that means that when you got a new fleet, you have to have the infrastructure that comes with it. And of course, that means a lot of investment that has to go to other areas. And also you have to retrain your people, create different skills, have different parts, different way of thinking. And of course, digitization is necessary for our company, so we have to invest in that as well. We have to invest in trying to get new people to our company that are younger, that have a different culture and can understand better this change in technology, going from the old petrol buses to electrical and hydrogen buses is a total new way of thinking, not only technically, but also from the perspective of driving those buses around Athens. They are all run on a specific software, and every technical detail of the bus is on one software. Therefore, we need to have all the backup needed in our IT departments to prepare not only for what is everyday business, but also for possible cyber problems that might occur. And of course, it is a time where things are quite problematic in that area. What I'm trying to say is that maybe the numbers in macroeconomy are showing a different picture. I don't know about that, but moves and investments like the ones we did the last 5 years that are changing the whole face of public transport for the public good that we are offering, but also on the other hand, we are creating multipliers for many, many smaller places. And I give you just one example. We, as a government, as a Ministry of Transport, we created a program where our older buses that are coming out of commission are given to to the islands that are remote, in order to have and service the people that are living there. Now that creates, obviously, with older buses, an environment where they have to service their buses, because we cannot offer from Athens that service. Therefore, they have to find ways of doing that. That creates new opportunities and creates new jobs. even in an older bus, even in an older technology bus. But that gives, in that island, in that small population, the incentive of doing other things. Therefore, there are multipliers that are happening because the government, the Ministry of Transport and ourselves, they decided to fund this, and we made it happen in the last 5 years, and we hope by 2027, Athens to be one of the greenest in terms of public transport cities in Europe.
Thank you very much, Stefanos. Over to you, Dimitris Primpas, IBM, for a sectoral perspective, hopefully.
Thank you very much for the invitation today in this economist event. We're glad to have this also this year. It's evident from all the discussions in these 3 days that technology is a catalyst for the growth on the next years across industries. So I would like to share with you some of the experiences that we have and what we see around the globe and how we can move this best practice also to the country. It's evident that the technology will change how all the companies operate, both public sector and private sector, and will affect all the industries on a different way per industry. All of speakers mentioned AI. We'll see new things that are coming. The question is how we are prepared for that and how ready we are to adopt them. It's evident that in the Greek public sector there have been big steps improvement with funds from RRF. So many foundational things have been created in the country or are implemented right now, although the projects are ongoing. So the country has done, from the public sector, a big step improvement. We need to continue this step. We need to go to more sophisticated services and more automated services that will be able to produce and give to the citizens. And on the other hand, this should be the enabler for the private sector to be easier to invest in the country and be easier to expand and growth in the country. In order to do that, what we need to first to understand and have the data foundation that are necessary for all the companies and the enterprises in order to be able to use the technology. So the first thing that is we need to normalize and have all our data governed and properly managed within the organization. One interesting statistic that we have from the globe is that only 1% of the enterprise data are used right now on enterprise AI use cases. So you can see what is the potential that can unlock if we have more enterprise data that will unlock AI in the future. Also, AI is coming and will transform how the companies are operating. They not only give efficiency in terms of labor, indeed it gives some efficiency to the labor part. It can maybe offset the population aging. Yes, these are things that we may see them. But the biggest step improvement will be when the AI use cases will really transform how the businesses and what are the services that how we produce and how we monitor them. We have many use cases, for example, to give you some ideas. On the finance sector, many AI things are working on preventing fraud, or we're completely changing the way that the banks are speaking or are dealing with their clients. The total customer service, customer experience is different. For example, in manufacturing, we can have better quality controls. So there are many use cases per industry that can be used. That the question is how ready and how fast we can do it. There are many studies that we have seen that Europe is lacking versus United States on the pace that we use technology and we use AI. So this is one of the steps that we need to further improve. And put in this perspective within the country, we did a first good step improvement that we're creating the foundations, but we need to run. We have one advantage, many of the speakers have already mentioned it, the advantage is that we have a good skill set and better compared to the European average, because we have universities that produce very high quality graduates, but we need to capitalize that. And if we capitalize that, we may have a competitive advantage for the future for our local enterprises.
Thank you very much. Finally, Stefan Kraus, Chief Operating Officer of Henley Partners. I guess we want to hear from you, from your experience, what has made Greece attractive from the point of view of your visa, golden visa program?
Yeah, thanks a lot, and good morning. It's a pleasure to return to Athens for the 29th Annual Government Roundtable. We're here in a moment of inflection. The global economy has recovered from the shocks of the early 2020s and is reconfiguring itself along new axes driven by innovation, sustainability, shifting demographics, and intensified competition for capital and talent. And across Europe, and particularly in Greece, a new story is being written, one that rewards strategic reform, entrepreneurial vision, and inclusive growth. Greece revival in recent years has been remarkable. Once associated with economic instability, Greece is steadily becoming a beacon of resilience. Strong post-pandemic recovery, fiscal reforms, digital progress, and infrastructure upgrades have created a dynamic, investment-friendly environment. A critical pillar of this transformation, as you stated, is the Greece Golden Visa program. With more than 5.5 billion euros in foreign direct investment generated over the past decade, it has supported real estate and tourism while attracting globally mobile talent, capital, and entrepreneurship. Since launching in 2013, the program has seen a rise from 359 applications in 2014 to over 9,000 in 2024. Popular investment routes include real estate from 250,000 to 800,000 euros, fixed-term deposits of 500,000 euros, government bonds valued at 500,000 euros or more, shares in mutual funds valued at a minimum of 350,000 euros, and startup investment of at least 250,000 euros. Despite higher investment thresholds introduced in 2024, Greece is the third most popular residence program in terms of applications we have handled this year, just behind Spain and Portugal Golden Visa program. Greece is a prime case study of how investment migration programs, when designed well and implemented transparently, can drive inclusive economic growth. Beyond property, which raised 4.5 billion euros last year and the year before alone, Golden Visa capital has had spillover effects across the economy. Retail, education, professional services, and digital infrastructure have all benefited. The program's impact is evident in the revitalization of urban areas. The 250,000 euro threshold for restoration projects has been key for regenerating inner city Athens. Vacant buildings from the economic crisis have been repurposed into residential apartments, attracting investors seeking future growth. Meanwhile, financial instruments such as government bonds and mutual funds are gaining momentum, reflecting investor confidence in Greece's broader economic outlook. The Greece Golden Visa program has demonstrated its value in real estate, but its transformative potential lies in its adaptability. It could channel capital and talent into other high-impact sectors. Digital innovation and artificial intelligence are prime examples. Greece's growing tech ecosystem, supported by EU funds and international investment, is turning cities like Athens and Thessaloniki into regional innovation hubs. Tailored investment options could help fuel this transformation. As we see at Henley Partners, strategic relocation is no longer just about lifestyle. Affluent families are seeking stability, opportunity, and purpose, and Greece offers all three. And with a sector-attuned visa program, these aspirations become investments in national progress. Henley Partners data confirms this trend. Greece ranks among the global top 10 destinations for millionaire migration this year, with a net inflow expected of 1,200 millionaires and their families, with estimated wealth of $7.7 billion US. And many of them are able to relocate via the Greece Golden Visa program. Greece has already begun adapting its Golden Visa framework. Last year's reforms were pivotal, so higher minimums for real estate, preservation of the 250,000 euro threshold for restorations, a ban on short-term rentals under 60 days, and expanded access to startup investments. Aligning Greece's Golden Visa program with national goals will require introducing sector-specific pathways, ensuring capital is directed to high-impact areas such as entrepreneurship, environmental tech, digital infrastructure, and regional revitalization. In parallel, Greece's lump sum taxation regime offers an attractive complement, drawing individuals who want a stable, tax-efficient base in the European Union. By refining its investment migration model and leveraging such complementary policies, Greece can maintain its leadership and set the benchmark for the next generation of Golden Visa programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have some time for discussion, so I want to come back to what Professor Jacobides, his contention at the beginning, which is that notwithstanding the substantive improvement that's been made on the fiscal and macro front by this government, his concern is that what we're not seeing is a sufficient shift of resources and investment into more productive, higher value-added sectors. And instead, what is happening is that we're kind of perpetuating the kind of core sectors of the Greek economy, and that the big issue here, and one of the reasons why that isn't happening, is because of policy capture and vested interests. So, you know, he did throw down the gauntlet a bit, so we should tackle this. So let's ask you, Minister, to come back.
Well, I heard very carefully Professor Jacobides, and I would like to pose the picture. Where is Greece now, 5.5 years after the investment grade? Because it's only 5.5 years after the investment grade. And I'll have to say that, as you know, we are running on a new fiscal structural plan for all European countries. This is very important. I think it has passed unnoticed from all the business community that there is an expenditure benchmark that all European countries have to meet. And keep in mind that Greece is one of the countries that has met the expenditure benchmark for 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and there are 8 European countries that have not met that, and if you don't meet the expenditure benchmark, then you go into maybe an enhanced supervision. So you have a country that has passed a financial crisis. It has serious social infrastructure issues that has to meet, and at the same time, it has to sustain the growth, a growth that surpasses maybe by 4 times the European growth. It has decreased the unemployment, and at the same time, we have an increase in exports, reaching 50% of the GDP. At the same time, I do not agree about subsidizing tourism. We don't see any subsidies at all, by all the European programs for tourism. For example, neither RRF or the programming period that is running 21-27 has particular subsidies. And at the same time, don't forget that tourism was the sector that sustained a significant part of the GDP during the financial crisis. So we need to keep tourism going. It's very important for Greece. At the same time, we are working on other sectors. For example, I see here representatives from the pharmaceutical sector, and Greece, even though it has actually it's 3% of the European population, it produces 10% of the pharmaceuticals, the European pharmaceutical products. And at the same time, we see redirecting money, particularly to smart manufacturing and smart agriculture. And this is where and at the same time, for the infrastructure, we see that particularly with RRF, we have a significant support for infrastructure projects reaching 2.7 billion euros. We have a significant support for the civil protection, having a solidarity fund in Europe that actually cannot support the climate crisis. During the Daniel issue in Thessaly, we received, on a damage of 3.5 billion euros, we received 100 million. So there, we had to redirect money to support the climatic crisis, and that's why we have a civil protection program that is very high. We need it. There's no other way to do it. We have to use European funds. So what I'm saying is investment clawback for the pharmaceutical industry. It's a sector that's growing stronger. We have the agriculture, smart manufacturing, smart agriculture. So we are redirecting funds, but at the same time, we have to keep in mind that we have issues, significant issues, in supporting our infrastructure in Greece, since for 10 years there was no investment in the infrastructure because we were undergoing the financial crisis. Now, what we've done is we sustain growth, we reduce unemployment, we digitize the country, digitalize the country. We would like to upskill our people. We like to continue on that. We would like to continue on the reforms. It's an inclusive growth project. Inclusive growth means that you have a growth, but you have to redirect it at the same time at many issues that are very significant for society.
Yes. So the challenge for you is, this is a very complex process that we're talking about in terms of shifting resources and investment, away from kind of the bedrock, what has been a bedrock of the economy into new sectors, and a government that is juggling with all these other demands and issues. How do you go about doing that? So I'd like to hear your kind of recipe for doing that.
So a couple of things. First thing to say is, by no means do I want to underplay the difficulty of achieving what has been achieved at the macro and the stability level, and I appreciate that government is much harder when practiced than when criticized from anyone to the other side. So the first thing is a base understanding. On the other hand, we need to put things in the perspective of what policy does. Policy, at the end of the day, provides some possibilities of steering. And forgive me, if we speak about the ability of having some support for the sector, the support that I was mentioning is, first, environmentally. And there is a subsidy which is on the norms as well as in the returns, and in particular in things like strategic investments. I would challenge that. We are putting, and most of the strategic investments, if you count them, are in tourism. They are not in drugs, they are not in high tech. If you count all the numbers, if you count the euros put, is a predominant emphasis on tourism, and it should not be. The reason that we think about policy by way of externalities is that it affects other things. It affects, again, the viability of the country and its environment, and we are starting to see an environmental crisis, and there are pressures, and I appreciate that it's very difficult to push back against the pressures, but they exist. And the second thing is that you are now starting to see the growth of the tourism creating a cost of living crisis as a result of Airbnb and Booking.com having essentially expanded the tourism sector and increased the costs of living, with rent increases being one of them. So the question there is about managing it. And I think we need to shift away from we are broadly supporting it, and the forces that would come to pressure are going to be in this direction. So what I'm suggesting is that when you put it in an international framework, Greece is imbalanced, seriously imbalanced, even when you compare it with countries like Spain, with countries like Italy that are not short on tourism, but we do have massive imbalances in terms of both the amount of activity and the amount of direct or indirect state support. And the final thing that's very important, the issue is unfortunately a boring, pedantic, sector by sector, try to remove part of the, I'm going back to the vested interest, the problems of regulation. And the issues of regulation isn't land use. The issues of regulation is the fact that we have an excessive number of limitations that means that innovation, each and every sector, is stopping. You spoke about AI. The problem for those of us who study, I focus on AI more now than I focus on sectoral imbalances, isn't the technology. It is the way that the technology can be integrated downstream in products. The reason we are not seeing yet AI productivity in any country of the world, generally, my friend Daron would agree with that, is that although the technology is able to deliver a number of things, the downstream conditions, even globally, make it difficult. Greece is an exemplar of this problem. We have people, but we cannot put it in investments.
Professor, just to, because we're running out of time, as usual, and but it's great to have a robust debate, but I wanted to get the other speakers maybe to come in, you know, not necessarily on, Colin maybe on this question, and maybe, you know, to try and say a bit more about the, you know, potential growth sectors. You mentioned defense. We've heard about pharma, where there's, you know, pharmaceuticals, definitely potential there. But yeah, what's your take on this debate?
I mean, yes, I agree with most of what I've heard. I think I particularly agree with the professor's perspective, where often we create, you know, most economies in the world are mixed economies. They're not pure market economies. They're not kind of centrally state-run. And we create them organically by, sometimes with the best wills in the world, creating rules that we think will help manage growth or will help constrain and stop some of the negative impacts. Because any policy choice you make is normally redistributive in some ways. There's always winners and losers. And the kind of longer-term implication of that is that you can end up with this kind of network or barrier of rules that makes it harder for new entrants to come in, even if the reason you've done that is to prevent something bad happen, for example, in the finance sector, or something around health and safety. So I think I do agree that there is more Greece could do in terms of liberalizing markets and making it easier for people to come in and challenge incumbents. But I'd make a couple of points. I mean, firstly, that's the kind of debate I have everywhere. You know, it's a mark of how far we've come that we're not talking about fiscal issues anymore. We're talking about the challenges that every advanced economy has in where does the growth come from, and can you pick the sectors that are going to drive it? And I think you can create the conditions to create the opportunities, but I still really don't believe that government should pick sectors that win and lose. I'm still not convinced that industrial strategy in the long term is anything other than a big fiscal issue.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit cautious on that. And then that feeds on to, well, where are the growth sectors? And that ultimately comes back to what we as economists tend to call comparative advantage. So pharma, yes, I think that's definitely a big opportunity for Greece. But actually, I think the tourism sector will always be big here. And I think that's a natural consequence of comparative advantage, notwithstanding the direct and indirect impacts of public funds and regulations.
Okay, I just want to give the other panelists a chance to come in as well, because we've got to finish in 5 minutes. Maybe to ask all of you, really, what, from the point of view of your sectors, what you would like to see in terms of government prioritization of reform in the coming period. For Stefan, you know, maybe to ask you, how could Greece make this program even more attractive, and not just make it more attractive, but actually make sure that it reaps, you know, some dividends, you know, real dividends in terms of investment in some of the areas that, you know, you talked about beyond real estate, where, you know, it's also created problems of pushing up prices, housing prices for Greeks and so on, which is something governments now try to address. But, you know, the kind of broader spillover for the economy. So yeah, just if you can quickly, or each of you, give you a chance to say what it is that you would say the government should be prioritizing. Yeah, just very quickly. A minute.
Again, I think you're backing the wrong tree here, because from the government, we received, as a sector, in the last 5 years, huge amount of funds, and we did what we did, and we're doing what we're doing by changing the whole face, as I said, of the public sector. But I had the opportunity to talk about what we did. The government gave us the money and what we did. Now think about what all the industries around the world did here by investing, and not only investing themselves because they had to bring their technology, their buses. The Chinese, the Spanish, the French, the Italians, these are the people, the companies where we got very large orders of buses. We became one of their best clients in the last 5 years. 240 buses from the Chinese, another 125 again from the RRF, Mr. Papathanasis facilitated for us to have. They're coming in the beginning of 2026, and therefore that brings their companies and their investment. They are investing in depots. They are investing in parts that are needed for the fleet that we got from them. The Europeans, again, the French, Iveco, Menarini from Italy, the Spanish that are competing in our new tenders now, they are all not only selling buses, but coming to Greece, investing, helping us to retrain our people, and of course, helping us to try and bring more people into our sector. So I think that gives a microeconomic picture totally different than some of the statistics in the macro world are saying.
So, Dimitri, one point you made was that actually, in terms of labour force and human capital, that Greece, has advantages here, has a skill set, and it just needs to capitalise on that. So how can it do that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, indeed, all the research studies shows that we have better than the European average. So there are 3 things that we need to focus. First is we are working right now, and government is doing a very good job to reduce the brain drain. So actually, we are bringing more people from abroad to Greece. So we need to continue that. So to keep the people working in Greece, there are, especially on the technology sector, there are very big investments that are doing right now with technology hubs in Athens, in Thessaloniki, in many places in Greece that are supporting all the projects that are running, and also, not only in the Greek, but from Greece, supporting projects on the European level. So we need to keep focusing on that part in order to not derail. It's on a good track, but we need to continue on that. This is priority number 1. The second priority is because all the technology changes that are coming will also change the way the skills are needed. So we need to be, and with this human capital, we need to be in a position to better reskill early enough the people in order to address the changes that are coming with all the AI things and all these new technology advancements. And the third, also to answer your previous question to the other colleagues here in the panel about the industry segments that we see investments. It's a very good point to see that it's not only what the government is doing. What the government is doing is very good, but it's also produce side investments. The investment in depot. We see investments on logistics, on supply chain. So we see big companies from abroad coming in Greece, creating these investments, which creates new jobs. This creates also projects for us in the IT sector. It creates jobs for many other industries within the country. So this is side investments that we should continue. And energy, logistics, supply chain are key things that we need to focus on the next years.
Excellent, thank you. Stefan, just quickly in 30 seconds, how can Greece improve this Golden Visa program?
I mean, the good news is that the Greek Golden Visa program is amongst the most popular programs we offer as a firm. In terms of the country of Greece, attractive for high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals. The program is well priced in comparison to other residence programs in Europe, and the program is well run by the government. But often less is more. So I think the issue with the Golden Visa program is that there are too many options. First of all, that confuses clients. What should they pick? Real estate option, fund option. That I think can be improved, specifically because you need to look into which options are popular or not popular and which options are meaningful for the country. For example, a 250,000 real estate investment in a restoration project is meaningful to develop the city, whereas a 800,000 open market property transaction may be not that meaningful for the economy. And then there's, for example, a 250,000 startup investment option, and clients normally applying for a golden visa don't want to invest in a single startup company. It's too risky. So they would prefer investing in a venture capital fund. And that's what the government could think of, introducing a venture capital fund option where you have a dedicated AI fund or R&D fund or a green tech fund. Or, for example, you could even think about some countries offer that, the donation option, where you donate into a social housing fund. And then the general public understands the benefits of a golden visa program. These investors bring money here and it benefits the general public.
Very good, thank you. So, final word to you, Minister, to respond.
Okay, I think we have agreed in a way that we have worked on the macro and we will work on the micro. But in a turbulent time, the most important thing for the Greek people are to feel safe. What I mean by that, inclusive growth means that you have to take into consideration the geopolitical situation, you have to take into consideration the social issues, you have to take into consideration the sectors that have steadily supported the economy, at the same time to redirect your effort and through reforms to enhance and support other sectors. I think this is the job we have to do. We have to continue. We have to continue to what we had promised, and also at the same time we have to bring back the Greek people that have left. This is only can be done by growth, by creating jobs, by continuously changing the business environment, and of course by stabilizing further and supporting our SMEs and sectors of the economy that have stayed behind because of the financial crisis. Tourism is very important, but also manufacturing, smart agriculture, agri-food, and artificial intelligence, and at the same time, the support for our talent to remain in Greece. And the only way to do that is support research and support innovative businesses.